the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
Like, he's actually one of the best stories in the NFL over the last few years. I mean, if you look at some of the all-22 of Geno the last 2 years in Seattle, like, he's throwing absolute darts. Like, he's throwing guys open. He deserves a lot of credit for evolving and just not giving up in the NFL and just becoming more of a prototypical passer. I mean, Geno is good and probably one of the more underrated quarterbacks in the NFL right now. Who's your favorite commit in the 2025 class right now for Tennessee? Who in the boat right now? Who's your favorite?
Yeah, I was going through today. I mean, honestly, man, there are a lot of guys. I try to do this. I think anytime that we talk about commitments, try to talk about guys outside of the top 247 a little bit. So I'm going to cheat. There's a guy on the back end that I like. I've long been a fan of the Nick Moore kid. He's a guy that I think ultimately at the end of the day is probably going to be pegged at center. That's what he's going to be, but he's going to be a darn good one. We had 6'2.5", 290 plus, two-way snaps, long for his size. What I mean by that, the arm length that we got, 34.5. Probably even if it's like 33 3/4, you really like that a lot. And for that scheme, what they want to do and have him be able to play, in his own scheme, play up at the second level. They mix and match, do a lot of things in the run game. Like, I like this kid. I like the tenacity. I like the competitive temperament. Really, really good position blocker too. Plays with really good quickness, balanced body control, never out of position. Love the timing with the hands as well. So I like him. Van Dorsler's a kid. Like, if you get into 12 personnel a little bit as your second tight end, you can see how him and Brain kind of play off each other. But he's a well-rounded kid. Like, these are the type of guys that are multi-positional, can play him out of the backfield. You can flex him out. You can put him in line. They end up.
There's some Princeton Fant there, maybe a little bit with Van
Yeah,
Dorsler.
this guy could, he could have a Sunday career because of the position flex, and he'll never be the guy.
Yeah.
But he's indispensable in some schemes, right? So Douglas Utu, another dude, could end up being a right tackle, could end up being a guard. I mean, honestly, you could probably sell me at center, but I think he's a technician, super polished, coming out of that program. Like, the guys that they've taken on the offensive line are all pretty interesting in the fact that they all do a lot of different things. I think, Moore is probably the one guy you pencil into a center spot. Even the Ogamoro kid, we don't have enough information currently to call whether or not he's going to be a tackle or a guard, but I really like his skill set at guard. So they've done a good job there, man. And all guys that, from a height, weight, speed standpoint, there's a lot to like.
Yeah, I mean, the last two classes, I think Glenn Ellerby and company have really figured it out, right? Like, these two, I mean, and we'll see what happens with David Sanders. But it kind of speaks to what I've wondered is when, like, talking to more just analytical guys in terms of what they see with schematically with Tennessee's offense, that guard and center play is maybe more important than tackles. And I mean, that's kind of one of the underrated parts of the last couple of years with Tennessee is I think people always wonder about who's going to protect Nico, the blind side, who was going to protect Joe last year. I mean, Gerald Mincey actually graded out better than John Campbell when he was in the field. Like, Gerald Mincey was he was serviceable as left tackle. You had Dane Davis, who's a former walk-on, and he's been able to flip and be okay. I think because of the tempo and because of the style, I think Tennessee's always going to be okay at tackle. Like, I'm excited about Lance Hurd. I think he'll be solid over the next 2 years in that spot. I think Campbell will be solid at right tackle. But I just don't really worry about that. I think Tennessee just really hasn't had that problem to this point in Heupel's scheme, and I just don't think they really ever will. And you look at the Georgia game where they got blitz, part of it was just Hendon's doing these one-step drops, and Jalen Carter's getting doubled in the interior, and they didn't have an answer. And I think that's one of the things where, to me, it kind of makes me and should make Tennessee fans more excited is Heupel and the staff has stacked a lot of interior guys that I think could all pop, and I think it seems like interior guys are more important, and getting those hits there is more important than the tackle spot, even though the tackles get more of the attention. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. The fact that also, like, I mean, you look at the SEC and from an opponent standpoint, I mean, the last thing that especially with quarterbacks, the one thing where you don't want to disrupt them in this offense is you don't want the interior penetration. Right. So I think obviously they put a big emphasis on that in the passing game. The other thing is, like, I think about Lance Hurd. Lance Hurd's going to have to step it up from a pass protection standpoint, but this offense kind of protects him from that. the other thing about him, he's got a 7-foot plus wingspan. You got a similar dude on the other side with Campbell. Those guys just in terms of width and length are going to be hard to get around. But in the run game, running off tackle, I think Lance Hurd is going to be a big plus. I have a hard time, man, not seeing that guy getting some first round interest. Obviously, we're really, really high on him coming out. Even the, less than 200 snaps he played last year, I went back, I watched every one. Invested in those guys and him, but big fan of him and his progress. And if it wasn't for Will Campbell and Emory Jones, right? I mean, he'd be there. And I get that he don't want to play guard either. The guy that I want to mention is Marion. Huge fan. It's kind of interesting because he doesn't have crazy production in terms of the sacks and the TFLs, but you got to dig into the tape. And Jordan Ross was a guy who only had 2.5 sacks at Vestavia Hills as a junior. I remember talking to our team here and just saying, hey, you got to dig into the tape to understand the impact that this guy's having on the field. And Dye's a guy that's very, similar in terms of the way that he moves to a guy like Jordan Ross, but very
nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.